Welcome to today's webinar with Flexera and MachineShop, brought to you by we.CONECT. My name is Scott Niemann, and I'm a Principal Product Manager at Flexera, and will be one of your speakers today on the webinar titled Excellence Starts at the Edge. I will also be joined by Michael Campbell, CEO of our strategic partner, MachineShop. So before we get started, I'd like to take care of some housekeeping. This webinar will approximately be 60 minutes long. We will be answering as many of your questions as we can at the end of the webinar. Please type them into the questions box on the right of your screen. You will receive a recording and a PDF copy of the presentation within 2 to 3 days of this webinar. So let's get started. So the agenda today is broken up into 3 pieces. I'm going to start talking about device management and updates in a connected world, and then I'll pass it over to Michael, who is going to talk about device relationship management. And then to finish it off, we're going to talk about how important it is to update your devices for a successful monetization strategy. So we all hear about the number of devices growing in our everyday lives that are some way connected directly or indirectly to the internet. And this connectivity brings forth new business models through gaining insights to those devices, and through those insights, potentially allowing us to provide new services to our customers. Dumb devices, on the other hand, since there's no intelligence to enable that communication, it's very difficult to achieve a broader value because of the lack of visibility of what's happening on those devices. But smart devices can be value driven. So as an example, based on a device supplier's knowledge of those devices and how they're being used by their customers, they may be able to offer new services and capabilities to those customers essentially over the air without the customer having to acquire a new device at all. And ultimately, what this is going to do is drive a higher level of customer satisfaction. That is satisfaction in not only being able to provide an upsell capability for those devices, but it can really enable you to achieve a better level or proactive level of support for your customers, where potential issues and vulnerabilities are detected and dealt early on before the customer is even aware of that. So ultimately, you can't implement a successful IoT business model without this level of insights, enabling the control, the management, and potentially the autonomous updating of software on those devices. So the new focus of the IoT business model and monetization strategy is device being the central core unit of this. So as end users of devices today, we expect a flawless and secure experience because we experience this every day in our lives with our own personal devices. If there's a security vulnerability, we expect the supplier to send us an update. If we need to add a new service or application, we do that very simply today through our mobile devices, through an app store. That same level of user experience is no different when we're moving those devices to the business world. So be it government, be it industrial automation, or healthcare, or any industry where those devices, there's still the same level of expectation on the user experience. On the other side, on the device supplier side, we really see the computing power around IoT devices transitioning to the cloud, essentially being able to handle at scale the device insights that are coming in from those devices, helping suppliers drive business decisions around those devices. And we're seeing companies now supplying that same intelligence to their customers at the edge. Ultimately, the device and how it's managed is the heart of the digital business model. So device management and updates are heart of the digital business model. Really, it's about helping customers stay current and secure. And the best way to prevent security issues is to stay up to date with the latest and greatest software. Have visibility to know what versions of software your customers are using. So it allows you to service them in a more way where if you know what they're using, you know exactly what security patches, what vulnerability fixes you can deliver to those devices. And essentially, we want to learn about the software and how our customers are using those devices, because it enables us to make better decisions on what new products and services we can offer them later on. So with that, what I'd like to do is now turn it over and transition to Michael, who's going to talk about managing devices. Michael?
Thank you, Scott, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone, depending on what part of the world you're in. And thank you so much for spending part of your day with us today. So as Scott said, my name is Michael Campbell, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of MachineShop. We're a 7-year-old global software company with a singular purpose of helping organizations manage the life cycle of their connected products. And we look at this as really the same way that organizations manage the life cycle of their customer relationships. As a matter of fact, I think it's ironic that last year the world spent $37 billion on CRM software to manage the life cycle of their customer relationships, but really a fraction of that to understand and properly manage the life cycle of their connected product portfolio. And this is really why we refer to ourselves as CRM for machines, because we think it's time for connected products to have the same type of value and investment that customer relationships do. And what I'd like to do today, really my intent is to help broaden your perspective on how to look at your connected product portfolio in the context of its lifecycle management, and really the two sides of the coin that come from having smart connected products. Or as I like to say, both the imperatives and the opportunities. Now, on the one hand, there's almost this sense that there's an implicit, maybe even an explicit contract with our customer, that when we've added intelligence to our connected products and we've connected that product to some network and maybe ultimately to the internet, that there's a level of operational assurance or an SLA that we're providing to our customers around that investment that they've made and that we've made. And again, I view this as an implicit and in some ways even an explicit contract and responsibility that we have with them. The second thing is really, I think, the foundation of why investments were made by organizations in connecting their smart products to a network. And that is the cost savings that comes from remote monitoring and remote management of these products, no matter where they are in the world. And then thirdly, in terms of helping to broaden our understanding of connected products, is to understand their role in the broader value chain, right? So it's not just the value chain in terms of other systems and products that they might be connected to, the upstream networks that physically connect them, the cloud infrastructure and enterprise applications around them, but also even within your organization, product management, engineering, sales support, on the customer side, support, operations, and so on and so forth, to understand there's a value chain of people and systems around your product. And then finally, as Scott alluded to, the holy grail of smart connected products is the opportunity to derive new revenue, and for that matter, high margin revenue, services revenue for your organization. And even if you choose not to actually monetize the product, you are increasing your competitive differentiation and the value to your organization by proper investment in device management. Now, Scott and I actually have full-time jobs helping organizations with their device management strategy, but don't take our word for it. Recently, a number of research firms have really started to pay attention to not just IoT, but beyond IoT, thinking about the new world of connected products and what this can mean to our organizations. And one of my favorite research notes came from Harvard Research, which really emphasizes the absolute imperative for organizations to embrace a smart services strategy around their products. And what I love about this particular quote is it emphasizes the relationship of the devices, machines, peoples, and systems together. Perhaps a little better known to most of you is Gartner research. So Gartner last year produced their first ever Magic Quadrant for industrial IoT platforms. And one of the things that jumped out at me out of this 40-some page report was a very specific section that essentially said platform providers and organizations are not providing sufficient attention to device management. Everyone wants to talk about AI and ML and AR and VR and all of these really sexy new technologies. But if you're not properly connecting, monitoring, and managing your product in a broader value chain, then none of those upstream services are going to bring any value whatsoever. And frankly, they just won't work. And then finally, ABI Research published a report recently talking about the scope and size of device management as a market opportunity and an imperative, both for the buyers and the sellers. And once again, it was a call to organizations that make connected products. You must pay attention to device management, or it's going to have an immediate and a long-term negative value on the solutions that you deploy. So what I'd like to do now is move to a couple of specific case studies, two journeys of organizations that we've worked with that I hope you find insightful. The first one, and I refer to this as one side of the coin is not so bad. This is a very large global maker of biomedical devices that really started to invest in device relationship management as a way to save money, as a way to streamline their operations. And until recently, they were literally going around with hundreds of technicians in the world updating devices with CDs and flash drives, right? It was the only way they had to download data from devices, from their products in the field, and more importantly, to provide new feature updates, bug fixes, security patches, etc. They were doing it manually. And as you can imagine, it was literally costing them millions of dollars a year. They actually made a decision a couple of years ago to work with a vendor that was really an IT monitoring and mobile device management provider, and found that that particular offering was not purpose-built for medical devices or non-IT devices. And they realized that having the wrong solution was actually worse than having no solution, which is why we started to work with them. And really where they were coming from, because this is a large company that grew through mergers and acquisitions in addition to their organic growth, is they needed to have not only a solution in place for remote monitoring and software update management, but they needed a common framework across their entire product portfolio, across all their regions. And then another consideration was that a lot of their products are sold through distribution, through channels, through dealers. And those particular organizations owned the customer relationship and therefore were a key part of the value chain in monitoring and updating these products. So they not only needed a system to do remote monitoring and management, they not only needed a system that could do so in any part of the world across any particular product, but they needed a system that provided access, guidance, and governance to the value chain of those that help sell and support the products. And one of my favorite quotes from one of the first conversations we had with this particular organization is they said, "We can only scale at the speed of our people." And with a solution that provides remote monitoring, remote software update management, and orchestration with other systems, they were able to achieve tremendous scale in their ability to support customers, not to mention the cost savings. Moving on to a second customer journey and an organization that we just recently started to work with. Without getting into the specifics of their particular product, you would find this product deployed on a wide range of public transportation systems, from high-speed trains to subways to buses. And their second generation product was indeed an intelligence system. It was electrical, it was mechanical, it had an onboard processor, it produced lots of data, it had software to help manage its operations. But the irony is that their second generation product was actually not connected to any network at all. And so anytime that there was an issue, or more importantly, a perceived issue with the particular product, they were getting calls. They got a lot of calls. They got almost daily calls. And they had to roll a truck and send a technician out who, with their laptop, plugged into the device, and literally 9 times out of 10 found out that the issue was not with their particular product, that something else had happened on board that particular transportation vehicle that created the perception there was a problem with their particular product. And so there was a tremendous amount of false positives being generated. And as you can imagine, this was aggravating and extremely costly. What the customer decided to do was upgrade to a third generation product to add an embedded router to their product. And now they were able to remotely monitor and manage that product. So the first thing they knew is that if they got a phone call, they were immediately able to go to the system to determine, was there an issue or not? So they could tell the customer, it's not with this, you need to go check something else. And the second part of this obviously is that if there was a problem, they could do a reboot, they could do a software patch, or any number of things that would save them from having to roll a truck, which was very costly. And then the interesting thing that happened next was, with this onboard intelligence and connectivity, the customers then began to say, we'd like to integrate it with other onboard systems, literally at the edge, not even involving any kind of cloud integration. So when they went from a first generation to a second generation to a third generation solution with embedded intelligence and connectivity, tremendous savings in terms of support costs. But the other thing they were able to do is increase the price of their product by 25%. Not selling a value-added service or a cloud service, but literally by adding this capability, they were able to increase the price of their product and produce some additional high-margin revenue. So where they're looking at now is how to actually add some additional value-added services. So they went from having a product that they made more competitive with higher pricing and higher margins to now some significant new service revenue that comes from their investments. So tremendous ROI, and it was a journey that went through 3 different generations of products. Now, one of the points that I want to make, and this only dawned on me about 3 or 4 days ago when I read an article written in a particular vertical market. Frankly, it was the building automation, smart building market. There was a research report that was done on how vendors in this marketplace were generating more recurring revenue off of their standard, typical traditional physical products. And one of the things that this editor wrote, probably without realizing the mistake that he was making, was he referred to this new service revenue as passive income. And I wanted to yell at the screen as I was reading this, because what that does is it creates this false perception that if I wrap a service and I run it in the cloud, that I can now start generating all this new revenue and I don't have to do anything. The classic make money while I sleep. Well, it is true that technically you can make money while you're sleeping, but you can't do that without making significant investments in systems and infrastructure and services that really make this connected product experience worth every nickel that you're investing and certainly what your customers are investing. And so what I'd like to do now is essentially talk about the pillars of the ideal connected product relationship. And again, what we refer to as device relationship management and the different components of that. And remember earlier I talked about relationships, even internally in your organization. How do you provide internal stakeholders like product management, engineering, and support and sales with the appropriate seat at the table to participate in the process? And then it goes to outside, right? So it's not just you, the producer of the product, but it's your customer. How are they truly engaged with this connected product and that experience? And as we alluded to before, there's often a channel relationship. and how are they involved? Do they have a seat at the table? Do they have access to the information? Do they have permissions to do updates, and so on and so forth? And again, while it is great to make money while we sleep, it is not passive, right? There needs to be a meaningful organizational investment where you're not going to see a return and you're going to have frustrated customers. And so as I wrap up, I'd like to just take a moment to talk about the specific features. When we talk about the pillars of device relationship management and best practices that our customers are using, let me just explain some of these things. So the first pillar, or the first node in device relationship management, is this whole onboarding. So the question is, do you have, with your device management offering, a way to onboard new users and to establish roles and permissions for how they can interact with the system, device data, and device management capabilities? Do you have a way of grouping your customers and your channel partners by organization type or different accounts? And finally, in many cases, your organization doesn't have just one product, but it has a portfolio of products. Each of those has unique attributes and requirements, etc., and the ability to understand those differences within your system. So after you have a proper onboarding capability within your system, the next thing is being able to actually provision these products. Now, the holy grail is zero-touch configuration. Can you send a product to your customer? Can that customer, with almost no interaction from a field service technical professional, can they turn that device on? Does it have the proper configuration information? Can it receive software updates before anyone actually starts to use the product? So the whole deployment management process is an important part of that. And the other thing that ties to device attributes is being able to properly account for what software is on what devices and having a good inventory of software asset management. And those two things really need to be done before we can get to the third kind of practical element that we always tend to jump to, and that is condition monitoring. When you've deployed and provisioned these products, have you set it up so that you're getting periodic heartbeat reports to know whether or not the device is operating fine? Is the network operating fine? Do you have automated alerts and notifications if there is a problem with the network, if there is a problem with the device, or an endpoint that's connected to the particular networking node involved? And then finally, as a part of monitoring, do you have a way of capturing automatically diagnostic data that can be shared with your customers to help them optimize their operational performance, but also product management and engineering in your organization? How valuable is it to receive diagnostic data from your products in the field in near real time or in retrospect to help you plan and optimize the future of that product and its roadmap? And then fourth, and probably one of the most critical to the success of your business long term, and the ability to really provide value and monetize value around your device relationship management offering, is truly systematic software management. Now, there's so many different attributes to what successful and proper software management and updates are involved. We can't get it, I certainly won't get into it here. Scott will talk about some of these in his part of the discussion, but it's absolutely essential that you have a systematic software management process in place. Not only does it have to work effectively when devices are not always connected to the internet, as Scott alluded to earlier, but even when you've done an update process, can you run a set of reports? Do you have an audit trail that say these devices were properly updated at this time and this place? And if it wasn't, do you know that? And then finally, a big part of this too is control management. We talked about users and roles and different organizations that will be involved. Do you have proper permissions in place for the folks in your distribution channel to participate when appropriate? And then following up, finally, a key part of device relationship management is even the ability to decommission devices. And it's not a typo, but systematic software management is a key part of this process as well. Can you remove devices from active connectivity to your platforms? Do you have a way to integrate this with your inventory management and your other asset management systems to know that a particular device has been removed from active monitoring? So decommissioning is as important as onboarding, provisioning, and all the other steps in the process. And then finally, just want to say a word, because we've talked so much about relationships of the devices and the broader value chain. One of the key pillars of our offering, and one of the most valuable aspects of what customers are looking for in their device management solution, is how do I actually automate certain things? If I see a condition or an event take place with one of my connected products, I want to be able to take action, whether it's log a ticket, do an automatic reboot, send an SMS message to the field tech who's on call, whether it's automating workflows like that, or even if it's simple data orchestration, right? So a device is producing data all day, all night, every day, all year long. Where do you want the data from that device to go? I'm sure there typically is an application that it's talking to, but you may also want to do storage in a cloud-based data lake, or you might have business partners or even customers that want access to certain data and receive that in certain places. So orchestration in the context of device relationship management is a critical element of a best-in-class solution, and one of the pillars that we've recently invested a significant amount of resources in to really tie all of these pieces together. So with that, I hope that the little bit of time that we've spent together talking about device relationship management, how connected products fit into the broader value chain within your organization and not, and a couple of customer journeys that I was able to provide a glimpse to, I hope that was helpful. And at this point, I'm delighted to turn it back over to Scott.
Thanks, Michael. So I'm going to talk about device updates and monetization. So in an everything as a service world, updates drive customer value. So I've been talking about previously about helping customers stay current and secure. So really, when we talk about an update solution, we're enabling devices themselves to sense if there's a new version out there, to be able to download those updates and security patches without the user actually having to be involved. And I think that's a very important thing, as traditionally, devices have been updated in many, for example, in auto. I know it's changing in the automotive industry, but today you have to do this manually through USB sticks within automobiles, or take your machine into a shop so that it can be updated by a service technician, which is very common. But now moving that capability based on the intelligence of the devices, so those devices can update themselves, is very powerful. What's also very powerful is what they are using. And as Michael was saying, knowing what is actually those assets on that device is very important, especially for the suppliers, because they need to know, especially in some industries, they have to make sure that their customers are on the latest and greatest because of compliance issues, like in the healthcare and the FDA. They have to ensure that the latest and greatest versions of software on the devices running in hospitals are on the FDA approved versions of those software for those specific devices. So it's really about automating this process for the software and firmware updates for those devices, and enabling suppliers to put in their own rules for the software automation of updates. And in doing this, it's basically a bi-directional way of communication, right? The supplier can send down service packs and security updates to the devices, but at the same time, we want to get insights to what's happening on those devices, especially in the update process. Because as you know, as a supplier is delivering updates on your mobile phone, for example, you may get, I happen to have an iOS-based phone, and I get notifications all the time that there's new updates available. However, I don't always apply them, and many times I just ignore them, like probably most of you do. Or maybe I download them and update them later. So those are actually very important key aspects of insights so that you know if those software it's actually being adopted by your customers, or if they're ignoring those updates, or if they're trying to download them and the installation has failed. So being able to gain that level of visibility is what we're referring to in terms of device insights. And having this capability and leveraging the intelligence on those devices to auto update, it's about being fast, agile, and transparent. And this could be as transparent to the end user as they power off the device and power it on, and there's a new set of capabilities there through an automated update. So talking about updates and staying current, of course, is very important, but there's some interesting stats I'd like to talk about. And the first one is around revenue leakage. And you may be wondering, well, how is this revenue leakage tied into this? And really, it's from licensing and compliance gaps in older versions. So we have a customer who, and many customers over the years have been supplying updates to their applications. But in cases where potentially those applications are not licensed, a customer came to us and was very interested in knowing what software updates they were sending to the customers and whether those customers were actually on current maintenance contracts or current subscriptions. Because without the licensing tied to those devices, it's very difficult to know if that software hasn't been copied or being used in an unsanctioned way, either intentionally or unintentionally. And what was happening potentially is that updates are being sent to a variety of different devices that were no longer in compliance with their maintenance or were in an invalid subscription. So in this case, basically this is potential revenue leakage in supplying updates to potential parties that shouldn't be really receiving those updates. So enforcing this and tying this in through a licensing scheme, which we'll talk about in a bit, and integrating that with the data and the monetization backplane can help prevent that revenue leakage. On the other hand, one of the important things, of course, is to prevent issues in the field, right? So security vulnerabilities, if you take a look at the 2017 cost of data breach by the global overview, basically they estimate a 3.6 million on an average cost of a single data breach. And one of the most simplest ways to, I would say, heal a device that's been compromised is through an update. Right? And to be able to do this in a way where it's automated, so the device doesn't have to shut down and be replaced physically. If that patch could be delivered over the air to that device, no matter where it is, connected or potentially even disconnected, it's very important to be able to do that. And we've seen the recovery cost from downtime in basically ranging from 50K to 500K an hour. The recovery costs from downtime related to unsupported versions. So again, it's all about having the visibility on what versions are out in the field, what customers are currently on valid subscriptions or maintenance contracts, and being able, based upon those versions, send the appropriate supported versions to your customers so that those versions can be installed and that they be up to date, either in an autonomous way, in a hands-free notion, or giving that flexibility to your end users on whether they can choose to download and install those updates or not. So we're talking about a professional management and update solution. It's very important. And why I say professional management and updating is, as anyone has known, software updating has been around in the ISV world for decades, right? We've all seen it on our machines, on our Windows-based machines or Linux-based machines, software updates. It's been around for quite some time. But in this case, we're talking about a different paradigm where there's devices out in the field, and these devices may be updated more frequently, for example, than your traditional type of desktop application. I've seen cases where devices are receiving not necessarily complete builds of software, but they're getting updates on a weekly basis. That's the most extreme case I've seen. But typically these updates could be sent to devices, and they don't have to be full. We're not talking this has to be a full patch or a release. It could be some information that the device needs to have available, such as maybe sending some information as a script or information for the database of the device. It could be essentially anything that the device supplier wants to send to that device. And that frequency can be defined by that supplier. And the one thing that we have to be able to do is really handle scale. So we're talking about IoT, potential millions of devices. And if you think about the revenue leakage I talked about, if you had an application that's sitting on 10 million devices, do you really want to manually know if each of those devices that are calling in for updates are on a current subscription? No, you have to have that automated. There has to be some platform in the back that knows, based upon the device calling in and what it's requesting, whether that device is belonging to a customer that's in a valid mode of maintenance or subscription. And that's very important. And you have to handle that at scale. Security, of course, vulnerabilities are an all-time high now, which makes having a professional update solution even more important to keep customers current, to be able to react quickly when you have to, and deliver a simple and intuitive experience. And what I would also say is that experience is really up to the device supplier. So whether you want to send autonomous updates to your customers or whether you want to give them an option to choose or a selection of different updates for the device, that is completely up to the supplier of the applications on those devices. So we talked a lot about connected devices, but as you know, not everything is connected. And most of the customers that we talk to always have a case where there's devices out there that are either sitting in a private network and they're not connected directly to the internet, or in some cases, they're disconnected for quite some time and they may not have a connection to the internet for weeks. And so they're intermittently connected. And so the monetization platform I spoke about in the middle here has to be able to respond to both. Now, on the upper right-hand side, really the monetization platform, it's key to hook into cloud platforms and business systems such as your CRM solutions and your ERP solutions, so that when orders for new services and products are accomplished by your customers, that information is fed into the monetization platform. So the platform knows what services have been acquired, who those customers were, and how those specific servers are deployed on those devices. Now, those devices on the bottom, on the left-hand side, can be connected applications. And those applications essentially could communicate with that IoT monetization platform for a variety of reasons. It could request any updates and patches based upon the current version it's running on. So if it's running version 5, it could communicate to the platform and say, I'm running version 5, are there any updates? And I'm also running on the embedded Linux platform, right? So it could be very specific to the environment that it's running in. And it could also send information such as, okay, these is the versions of software I'm running, these are the latest and greatest, and that information can be recorded back in the platform to give that visibility to the supplier. Of course, in the disconnected app environment, the same type of capability exists, but through an edge server. So those devices, while they're not connecting directly to the monetization platform, they're connecting this in the same fashion to the edge server. And the edge server, once it gains connectivity to the platform, it can relay all that device information in terms of requests for updates or even data that the devices may be sending, such as the current state of affairs of the manifest of software that's running on those devices. So either connected directly or through an edge server, both those models are supported within the platform. So the Flexera IoT monetization platform, what we say, you really can't monetize unless you understand the data and your customers and what they have rights to. So the platform in the central is key to this. And if you take a look at the two sides of here, basically on the left, you have the monetize aspects. So on the upper left-hand corner, typically when we talk about monetize, We're talking about integrating into business systems such as your ERP systems where your orders are being processed so that information is known to the platform. You are deciding on your monetization platform whether you're going to allow subscription models, whether your device is going to be on some type of metered model such as pay per amount of data. And based on those monetization schemes, as your customers are acquiring services, you have to be also able to manage the customers and organizations and give them portals to allow your customers to self-service their devices and to self-service their licensing entitlements. And through that, the devices and the software that's actually deployed on those customers, very important here, whether it's on the edge or directly, we have to be able to capture that data and tie that data to the actual organization and based on the license model of that customers. And we should be able to get insights in that platform on feature use of those applications on those devices, what versions of software they're running, how many licenses they activated. So all this knowledge based upon the data on the managed side tied in with the monetized side gives us a level of visibility that's very powerful. And of course, today's topic, we're really talking about also when it's time and we have something new to publish out to those customers, we want to be able to supply them in product updates, meaning updates that are sent directly from the device. So the platform is all about making informed decisions, right? It's all fact-based decision making based upon the data in the platform. So there's a lot of aspects to this. It does help you decide on pricing and packaging options for your products. So as you get the data and as you see ramp up of new products and services that you're offering to your customers, it gives you some visibility onto potential new pricing and packaging schemes where you need to focus in on your product development, for example, where you could essentially maybe add new services and add-on capabilities or bundle things together. Plan accurately for support and maintenance requests from customers on a certain version. As I alluded to, that's very important. And we really refer to this internally as entitlement-driven software updates. So when something is requesting an update, making sure that, right, if they're in a valid subscription or the maintenance contract is filled, that those only then, in those cases, the software updates are delivered in order to prevent revenue leakage. Of course, if there are hot fixes that need to go out to devices, you could also just send out those updates whether they're on maintenance or not. So that's completely up to the supplier. And so we really want to target the right customers with security updates and update campaigns. So if you have the visibility of software the devices are running that your customers have, you will be able to know which customers and which devices need those updates. So if you need to communicate to those customers, you're not just blanketing, your whole customer base and saying, hey, if you have this device, you need to do this, because you know exactly who has that, who is running that software, and you could target them directly, which is very powerful. So you could reach out to them without guessing who this is affecting. And of course, having visibility around, for example, feature use, and if you're using a monetization scheme and using licensing to determine new feature capabilities and selling that as add-ons, it also gives you an idea of whether they're being used, because you can capture whether features are being accessed in the application, and this can help you with end-of-life decisions, right? If you realize that a functionality is just not used at all, potentially it was a wrong monetization decision, or it's just functionality that's not used by your customers. So and of course, this all gives us visibility when we're talking about updates on version adoption. If you know when you publish a version of software, if it's being adopted by your customers, you can know that through generating reports in the platform based upon new versions and where they're being deployed within your customer base. So interesting a medical industry use case. So to give you a better idea when we talk about a professional update platform. So this is a very complex industry and the devices are very complex. And it's not simply all about just sending updates. So if you're looking at an MRI machine, there may be, lots of software in that MRI machine. But more importantly, if there's a version of software, it may be compatible on the hardware. So even if there is a software update available, there has to be a certain amount of dependency checks to make sure correct versions of hardware and other things exist that are compatible with the software update. So there's an extra level of visibility or dependency checks that go on before that software update is actually consumed by a device. And that's very typical in industries and devices within the medical industry. And so how's that done today? Well, technicians. They have to go out and validate the hardware and the capabilities of that, of those devices physically, and then decide how those updates are being consumed by those devices. So there's no automated way in much of that industry to do this. So there's no visibility or insight into the software firmware versions on those devices. And that's very key because they have to have that level of visibility for the FDA. And so, right, this is a perfect place where a professional update solution would not only send updates, but give another level of visibility to allow that dependency check-in to either, if in probably most of these devices are not connected, through edge server capability, supplying that same capabilities to those disconnected devices, and also being able to get the information back from those devices so we can prove, in our case in this industry, to the FDA that these approved versions of software indeed are running within these hospitals. So, in summary, essentially, is keeping your devices front and center, and really the whole end-to-end solution. I just talked about the Flexera IoT monetization platform, communicating with devices for monetization, licensing, and updates. And Michael talked about machine device relationship management, talking about zero-touch configuration, deployment management, and really that automation that comes with DRM, both systems being able to talk to a device supplier's CRM systems, to their ERP systems, really to give that end-to-end flow from the order, from essentially the initial order process to the provisioning of new services, and also to the decommissioning of those devices. Very important from an end-to-end solution for device management. And Flexera is helping IoT companies transform and run their business, right? There's award-winning technologies that I just showed on the previous screen, and we have a lot of area and a lot of knowledge in this area. We've won 2 awards as recently as 2018, IoT Enablement Company of the Year, and winner of the IoT Global Award, securing IoT Product of the Year. And so with that, to learn more about that and what Flexera is able to offer, take a look at Monetize What Matters. It's a very interesting video to give you an idea of the capabilities that Michael and I discussed. You follow us on our blog and Twitter and LinkedIn. And what I would like to do is first, on behalf of Michael, I'd like to thank everyone and myself to listen to us today, talk about device management, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Luis, who is going to go over the questions and answers session. Luis?
Perfect. Thank you, Scott. And hi, everybody. My name is Louise Stebbings. I'm the marketing manager at Flexera. I've been keeping an eye on your questions as they've been coming in. And I just wanted to say, I've marked some that we're going to answer today on the webinar live now. Any we don't get to, we will answer offline. So please don't worry. If we don't get to your question, we will answer those offline and make sure that we contact you with an answer. So, Michael and Scott, I've got the first question here. So you mentioned you also do licensing for devices. I think you probably both maybe talked about that. Would that typically sit on a gateway or on the actual device? Michael or Scott, who would like to take that one?
I can take it. So
cool,
Yeah, sure. So typically the licensing is on the device side. And that's essentially because, when you talk about your applications themselves sitting on the device, those are the things you want to protect and monetize. It's also, and what I mean protect and monetize is simply when you apply a licensing scheme to your devices, you're essentially determining how you want to collect data or how you want to allow users to access that application based upon the services they acquired. And so as your users are using that application and accessing those features, those checks need to be done directly on the device. And also it's important that the device sends that information up, so it could send it up through the edge server to the monetization platform, but it knows how it's behaving, so it needs to send that data based upon the licensing and other things that are happening on that device. It needs to be the thing that is sending the data to the IoT platform so it can be recorded. But it's definitely should be on the device side, if that made
Great.
sense.
Thank you, that does. So the next question I've got marked up here is, so this person says, we're managing hundreds of disconnected devices and we have different updating policies. How customizable is your edge server in this regard? So Scott, Michael, whoever would like to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So we are adding some capabilities to provide, you could call it update policies. We call them device groups, but basically you create, what happens here is that when I say you, it's the end customer, right? Because the edge server is sitting at the end customer. So for the example I just showed on the screen, the medical example, the edge server would be at a hospital and there would be an administrator at a hospital, and the administrator would be able to view the different devices within the hospital, the MRI machines, the breathing apparatus, any device that is connected to that edge server, and would be able to define certain policies and group those devices. So let's just say on the east wing of the hospital, right, I wanted to group those as one grouping and have them only update on the weekends. So Saturday and Sunday they would be able to update, but during the week we would not update these devices. And let's just say I have a set of very safety critical devices that I don't want disturbed at all. I could put these in a group and say these devices don't update at all until I change the policy, right? So you have your users, your end users have full flexibility on how those policies and updates are rolled out to your end customers.
Great.
Or your end devices.
That sounds good. Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question because I just want to be respectful of people's time. So one final question. So this person says, I like the connection between monetization and updates. Does that mean that a customer that hasn't renewed a maintenance contract won't get updates?
Yes, good question. I've alluded to that a few times and may have gave you that impression, but it's really up to the device supplier. So if they want to only send updates based upon when a device calls in, they're in a valid, the entitlement or rights of that device are in a valid subscription or maintenance, then they can deliver those updates. That's what we refer to as entitlement-driven software updates. But it's all up to them. If they have a specific update they just want to roll out to anyone, those updates can be created to forego those checks. And I've seen also there's a few industries. I'll give you an example: set-top boxes or some type of device industry where, as long as you have the device and you're paying, the service, you're paying your monthly fees. As long as you own that device, you get the updates. And so that basically owning that device is your entitlement. In this case, you could create updates that if these devices call in, just send them, right? So you have all the flexibility to prevent revenue leakage, but you also have the flexibility based upon the industry or applications you have out there to deliver the updates to your customers the way you want.
Great. That sounds good. Sounds like a good solution. Being mindful of people's time, I think I'll leave it there. If we didn't answer your question, please don't worry. We will answer those questions offline. So I'd like to say thank you very much to Scott Niemann and to Michael Campbell. And thank you to everybody who logged in today. As a quick reminder, we will be sending a recording of this webinar and PDF of the slides out as well. And if you do have any questions, as Scott's left on the screen there, don't hesitate to reach out either to us or to Michael, and we'll answer all your questions. So thank you again for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.